What's up, NHL fans? It is Tuesday, and this is your morning cup of hockey presented by Betway. If you're going to place a bet on Betway. Please play responsibly. Ontario only. Must be 19 years of age or older. Alongside Colby Cohen, I'm Jonny Lazarus, and it is trade deadline week. We got a loaded trade deadline episode. We're going to welcome on our good friend and NHL insider Frank Seravalli here in a few minutes. We're going to talk about basically every team that's either in the playoff race or is looking to sell during the trade deadline. So we're going to get into, a lot of teams here over the next hour. We're going to take a lot of questions in the chat. So don't be afraid to type in the chat, ask your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can to ask Frank. But before we do any of that, the New Jersey Devils yesterday fired Lindy Ruff, and
Wait a sec. You're not even going to ask me how I'm doing this morning. No. You're just going right into it.
Yeah, I'm going to go right into it.
Okay.
How are you doing? Do you really want to talk about how you're doing?
Go ahead, Jonny. You made a decision. You're going to live with that decision. Much better today.
Yeah. But Lindy Ruff gets fired yesterday. We talked about it last week. Asked Frank if it was too late, in the season for the Devils to make that decision. But after going 2-3, losing back-to-back games on their West Coast road trip, it seemed like Fitz was almost doing Lindy Ruff a favor by not allowing him to coach that game tonight in New Jersey, because I'm imagining Devils fans would have given him a very, very hard time tonight at the Prudential Center. But what are your thoughts on the firing and Travis Green taking over?
Well, I'll say this, and I said this on the show recently, and then I went and actually looked it up after I said it, and I'm glad that I wasn't so far off. Travis Green's head coaching record is not anything to write home about. He did not have much success as the head man in Vancouver. Now, in Utica, when he was in the American League, he did, which is why he got that opportunity in Vancouver. So, look, at the end of the day, I don't like when the narrative is that a coach got fired because of the fans and because of fan pressure and this and that, because I don't actually believe general managers do that. Maybe a little bit, but at the end of the day, he never had a goaltender. The guy never had a starting goaltender. Last year, he's a Jack Adams Award finalist. He's missing all his top defensemen. And I just, what's going to be different with Travis Green? Like, are you going to get that couple of game coach bump? Are the Devils really built to go on and do that? I mean, they're not making the playoffs. So I really like Fitzgerald, their general manager. He's a guy that I know personally. Spent a bunch of time with him at Frozen Fours when he was an assistant GM. See him, here and there, always really friendly, and he's a good Boston guy and whatever. And so I'd like to see him succeed, right? But to me, there's roster construction issues, and until you go out and get a goaltender, I don't think it matters who your coach is. I really don't. I think that they're really missing one of the most important positions in the game. And again, I don't really care what anybody else says. Oh, we don't need a goalie. We don't have to pay a goalie. Blah, blah, blah. Well, you do need a goalie. And I did see out there yesterday that the Devils have decided that Markstrom is their guy. Whether it happens this week or whether it happens in the offseason, they're certainly going to continue to knock on those doors and try to make that happen, because there's just not a lot of those guys out there. So I don't think it's going to be very much different with Travis Green, other than the wake-up call it sends to players. Because, look, I don't think players necessarily disliked Lindy Ruff, right? I don't think he's an asshole that guys don't like, and so I just think, like, maybe they're going to look in the mirror and realize that the players got this guy fired. Maybe that will give them some opportunity to kind of.
He's also been there for a long time, though. It just could have been time,
Lindy Ruff?
Yeah.
He's long time?
He's been there since COVID. That's 4 to 5 years almost.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, he came in during the COVID season.
Because he was on the Rangers coaching staff.
Yeah. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure Lindy Ruff.
I don't agree with you that he's been there for that long, but maybe he has. I don't.
Lindy Ruff took over for the Devils on July 9th, 2020. So that 2020, 2021 season.
And then he just signed an extension, if I'm not correct,
this
summer.
Mhm.
So now you're going to pay a couple of different coaches, which I don't think the HBSE, which is the parent company in the New Jersey Devils, Josh Harris, David Blitzer, I don't think that they're going to be necessarily thrilled with that. But, he's got to get a goaltender. It's just at the end of the day what it comes down to. Dougie Hamilton will help them improve, obviously. I kind of question them trading Ryan Graves, but Ryan Graves has been abysmal in Toronto, so maybe he knows something we didn't know with that trade. I do like John Marino back there. I do think Nemec has a bright future. I think Luke Hughes has ways to go to be a reliable defenseman in the NHL, even producing reliable. You just, it's hard to, unless you're going to score 80 or 90 points as a defenseman or 75, like you can't be a liability out there unless you're putting up.
I heard yesterday that the Devils might be interested in Ullmark and doing something with Boston, like bringing DeBrusk in as well, and looking to get rid of Toffoli going to Boston the other way, and maybe another player under Jersey. But that's another goalie that I don't know how. I'm not trying to sound like I know anything. I was going to ask Frank about it today, but I heard there was interest there as well from the Devils in Linus Ullmark.
Well, look, Ullmark was an all-star last year. He was up for the Vezina last year. Who wouldn't be interested in Ullmark? Yeah. The rumors are swelling that Swayman's about to sign an 8-year contract extension for somewhere in the 7 range.
Did you see all the stuff on Twitter last night? Like everyone was saying, Ullmark's not in the building or whatever. Like people were saying Ullmark's not on the bench. And after the game, Linus Ullmark tweeted like that meme of him coming out of a coffin, that he was, in the building the entire night or whatever. So he was having fun with it too. But yeah, we'll find out some more information. We got Frank waiting to hop on, unless Colby, you had one final thought before we welcome in Frank.
No, bring him in.
All right,
bring him in.
Let's bring in NHL insider, our friend Frank Seravalli. And Frank, we're going to hold you here as long as we can today. So I hope.
Oh, great! It's like being in prison.
But how come you keep referring to Frank as your friend? Are you guys friends? Is that legit that you're friends?
We text on the side.
I prefer to think of it as employer-employee relations.
I would say we're boys, Frank, and you can deny it as long as you want. But I know that
I think it's premature to say that you guys are friends. But in the show today, you've called him your friend 3 times. I've got 20 plus years of service with Frank, so I'm very comfortable saying that. Or maybe the other way around. He's got 20 plus years of service with me. I'm just curious. I just am looking for clarification. Frank's a details guy.
We were talking about the date last week. He was invested,
I thought then the Dave and Buster's pivot was extremely suspect.
Yeah.
And Colby tweeted a pic of his wife to some loser who said that he shouldn't take dating advice. And I was thinking about tweeting a pic of my wife. And then I was like, you know what? Not worth it. But trust me, I've totally outkicked my coverage.
I didn't. You did outkick your coverage because your wife is an actual saint. She is a literal saint.
That too. But yes, she's also quite good looking.
But I definitely did reply to the person who said that they wouldn't take dating advice with me with a picture of my wife, who I, am very proud of how she looks. But let's get to it today, Johnny, because, in a perfect world, we're going through 30 teams with Frank today. We're putting his feet to the fire.
30 teams?
No. 30 teams. No, I'm just kidding.
Why leave out the other 2? Let's just, 30 plus. You might as well.
So wait, let me start here, Frank. I'm going to go off the board at you a little bit here before we get into it. And, I'm watching I'm flipping around last night. I know Johnny's at MSG, so that's the game I'm kind of watching the least because he's got that one. I'm kind of watching Flyers. I'm keeping an eye on the Vegas game because I'm like, Columbus is beating Vegas. What's going on here? And here's who I'm curious about, Frank. His name has popped up a couple of times. Columbus traded for Ivan Provorov this offseason, okay? Mm-hmm. He's got this year and next year on his contract with a cap hit of $4.25 because LA already retained $2.25 of his salary. So you could have Ivan Provorov at $4.25 million, obviously for the rest of this year, but next year as well. The value you're getting in that type of player for that contract to me would be massive. And Columbus just doesn't seem to have much of a direction right now. And look, Do I think he's a guy who can help Columbus? Yeah, he's a good defenseman in the NHL. At 4.25, he's a great defenseman in the NHL. Great at that number. Are teams calling and talking about him? I know he's not the sexy Noah Hannafin name out there right now, but I got to think people are kicking the tires on Provorov.
If we're going to get through 30 teams, the questions are going to need to be shorter than that.
I had to
in all seriousness, though, when it comes to Provorov, here's my understanding. I think after Jarmo Kekalainen had gone out and acquired a bunch of these pieces, that if at all possible, John Davidson wants to leave the bulk of this team building up to the next general manager. Now, I'm sure that someone like assistant GM Josh Flynn would have a lot of say right now alongside Davidson in terms of steering the ship and where this goes. But what really would interest me or excite me if I were another team is, yes, Provorov, but what if I could possibly juice the package and get Provorov at half of that instead of 4.25, 2.125? I mean, that is what would really be attractive. I just think there's some lingering discord that exists around Provorov, fair or unfair, because you think about the players that the Flyers offloaded this past summer, Hayes, Provorov, and D'Angelo, and John Tortorella has been extremely vocal in saying we needed to move those guys to improve the chemistry and character of our team. The Flyers traded away those pieces. Yes, they got Sean Couturier back and Cam Atkinson back, but they've been a way better team. So is there something to the idea of addition by subtraction? I think all those things considered, between interim GM and, wanting to build toward the future, my guess is Columbus views them as more part of the solution than the problem, that he stays.
Frank, are you hearing just a pivot? I know we're going to go team from team here. We were talking before you hopped on about Linus Ullmark and the Devils. Now that they've fired Lindy Ruff, Travis Green coached wrong goalie. Linus Ullmark and the Devils, though, I heard yesterday. Just
Travis Green coached
Jacob Markstrom in Vancouver.
Yeah.
But yeah, I messed that one up. Let's -1 on the day. But any conversations regarding Linus Ullmark and the Devils?
I would say that Tom Fitzgerald has called on quite literally every goalie in the league.
Mm-hmm.
I was told he even called Pittsburgh a few weeks back on Tristan Jarry.
Really?
I was like, Tristan Jarry, first year of a 5-year deal? Like, wow, okay. We're turning over quite literally every stone possible. I don't have any definitive proof that he's called on Ullmark, but my assumption would be that he probably has. That said, and I don't know what Boston is going to do over these next 3 days. Don Sweeney is quite secretive. But what I would say is this is a 2-goalie league. The Boston Bruins, I think, lost in round 1 last year because they didn't flip goalies in their series. And I think they've got such a good thing going between Ullmark and Swayman. It seems like they're in the process of talking to Swayman about an extension. That why would you I would try and ride that out as long as I can with two guys who get along, not just get along so well, but play at such a high level together. Someone tweeted out this yesterday, and I don't have the tweet in front of me, so forgive me, but they said it was a picture of the Bruins roster on Daily Faceoff, and it said, how is this team any good? And the answer is their goaltending has been elite these last 2 years, and I just wouldn't mess with it.
I'm
Cole,
laughing
did you
right
see that
now.
comment in the chat? Yeah.
Some of our chat today is really on fire. Machine Gun Yanmark said, does Frank sleep? His hair is the same every morning. Is he a cyborg? Yes, he is a cyborg. And no, he does not sleep. And then somebody tweeted, who's more desperate, Tom Fitzgerald for a goalie or Johnny for a girlfriend?
It's definitely Johnny for a girlfriend.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Fitz's job's on the line, so not mine. So.
I don't think so. He just signed an extension in this calendar year in 2024.
They don't get a goalie?
Well, but this is 5 years now to get a goalie. 5 seasons. He took over in late January of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And he's had this long a period of time to go out and get a goalie and fix that situation. If the season ended today, for the 3rd year in 5 that he's been manager, the Devils will have finished in the bottom 3 in the league in save percentage. 3 times in 5 years is inexcusable.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I would add about the Devils, and I know you didn't ask. We've talked about their roster and its construction. How many teams in the league can withstand taking 4 defensemen off the ice from last year's team? Graves gone, Severson gone. Okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
You try and bring in new pieces, but then Dougie Hamilton gets hurt. Siegenthaler missed a huge chunk of time. It's 4 of your top 6. I don't like. I love Luke Hughes and Simone Nemetz, but I'm sorry, those guys can't come in and lead you back into the playoffs and win rounds.
And they're putting
right
John
now.
Marino in a situation, in a minute situation, in a role that it's not real conducive to his success. Like, he can play on your second pair, but when he's got to play 20 plus minutes a night against top pairs, it's not who he is. I mean, he's a solid 2-way defenseman who moves the puck pretty well, but it's too much. It's too much to ask of him. I liked that trade when they made it, but let's go to one of Johnny's favorite teams, Frank, and the New York Rangers. Okay, not one of.
We're gonna let me ask about them.
Johnny's favorite team, the New York Rangers. They played a game last night against the Florida Panthers, and I always find it interesting during the season when top end teams play right before the trade deadline, because I do believe general managers look at those games as huge measuring sticks, and they say, okay, if we can't beat Florida today, how are we going to beat them in, let's say, a conference final? Here's what we need to add. So what are you thinking for Chris Drury? Who's he in on? A lot of noise around Kakko. Vetrano and Henrique has constantly been linked to them. Wenberg was even floating around yesterday. Larry Brookside tweeted that he's usually got somewhat of a line on Drury, so give him credit there. But where do the Rangers stand with things after last year's deadline was a flop for them? They brought the big splashy names in, but it didn't work compared to the year before when they went the other way with the depth signings, and it did work.
I just want to add one thing, Frank, before you answer, just like a pulse of the Ranger fan base, just to give more of a background here. Some fans are saying we can't get rid of young talent or prospects because we can't throw away the future. In my mind, I think Gabe Perreault is an untouchable, but I think Ranger fans should be willing to give up picks. I think Kakko should be in that conversation if you're not giving him up for a rental. But the Rangers have won 1 Stanley Cup in 84 years, and they haven't won a cup in 30 years. I don't understand the thought process of we have to be cautious about the future. Like, at what point do you really just, I don't want to say desperate, but at what point do you say we have to try to win a Stanley Cup here? Like, this is an original 6 franchise. It's embarrassing that they've won 1 cup in 84 years. Is it not? Am I crazy for thinking that? Like, I don't care what these players do in 7-8 years. Like, the Rangers have.
Thank you for the fanfare, but can we let him answer the question about who
that
they're
not an important background? Like you asked I was going to ask.
We know the history,
and you ripped it from under me.
We know the history.
You
ripped the Ranger question from under me, so I wanted a little bit of
background. He just knew you were so horny to ask it that he just had to get in front of it. What I would say is, I think the Rangers are trying to walk the line. I think Chris Drury wants to be aggressive. It's in his nature. I think Rangers ownership wants to be aggressive. That's what they do. And to be fair, I would actually take it a step further. And I would say that 2 years ago, even though they went on a deep run in the playoffs, that trade deadline was just as damaging to the future as last year. I mean, people forget with the Andrew Copp trade that pick, it ended up being a first, a second, a fifth for Andrew Copp, and he walked.
Mm-hmm.
Then you add in a fourth for Tyler Mott, and all of a sudden a third for Justin Braun and a fourth for Frank Vetrano. You gave up an entire draft board in 2022, which is fine. You went on a nice run and you enjoyed it. But you do that 2022, then 2023, Tarasenko and Kane. at some point there needs to be a balancing out of this, because there is still a core here, especially with the Rangers on defense and Shesterkin and net. Like, I love the Rangers defense. I think outside of, I'd put them right up there with Dallas in terms of 1 to 6 being the top, defense core from top to bottom. In fact, I would argue that the Rangers have the best right side defense in the entire league. With Shesterkin in net, and he's back to playing at Shesterkin-like levels these last couple weeks, and your forward group, like, to target a third line center and to target additional right wing support, to me is entirely reasonable given what this market is right now. I think it also makes sense to wait. I was talking to a manager the other day who said, you can't believe how much prices have dropped from January until now. So the longer this goes on, the closer we get to 3 p.m. There's 50 names on my trade targets board. Not all 50 of those guys are going to go. So part of it is a waiting game. Part of it is fit. And if we want to have the Capo Caco conversation, my argument would be, don't get lost in where he was picked. Like, block that out and strip the name tag off of his jersey and then evaluate the player. Because what you're seeing this year is not close to any good. And more than that, I think we all liked what we saw last year, but at basically 23 plus years old and 280 games in the NHL, you're no longer a prospect. It doesn't matter where you were picked anymore. In fact, the only way it will help the Rangers is that some other team out there is looking at him through that lens and saying, hey, this is a guy that went number 2 overall. Maybe we can drag something out of him and take him from what, was kind of at this point his ceiling of 40 points. And then can we get him to 60?
No, I agree with that. And I think there's a lot of fear of what JT Miller has become and what Pavel Buchnevich has become. And I think that's where Ranger fans, have that little bit of fear in getting rid of a young player, in case of what he could potentially turn into someday. But I don't know if that's the case. Like, Colby and I were talking about it, where we think Capo Caco is a solid, cheap third liner, and that's how he should be looked at.
He makes $2.1 million. He's under team control. He plays 13 minutes a night. To me, like, for $2 million,
he has 11 points.
Listen, I understand that, but he $2 million on the third line. I mean, what do third liners in the NHL make now?
But fourth liners produce 11 points, and they make $1 million.
Right, but didn't he produce? He produced more last season. Okay.
Right. And he's still 23. I get it. I'm not saying give up on him. My point is he shouldn't be anywhere close to a category where he'd be an untouchable or anything like that. And I think that's how at least how I see it in my social media feed, that's how some Ranger fans look at it, saying like,
it's a 50-50 divide.
Yeah, we can't give up on this guy. And it's like, no. My thing would just be evaluate him free from the emotion of just, again, take away, watch the player and take the name tag off of his jersey and where he was drafted. And I don't even really think it would be a conversation of, can we trade this guy or not?
I agree.
Can we do one other thing in talking about the Rangers right now, Frank? Ariel tweeted or messaged the chat and said, is there any truth to Tuch to the Rangers? And I mean, I looked at Tuch's contract, and like, to me, I could be shocked if he got traded. The value you get for Alex Tuch at 27 years old, $4.25 million. Why would they trade him from Buffalo? Is that realistic that might happen?
I personally don't think so. I think teams have called. I think Buffalo, I think they could be talked into a bigger deal at this deadline, but you'd really have to present a compelling case to Kevin Adams to do so. I think they're way better off waiting until the summer and taking the emotion out of what's been a really tough season. I think some significant changes are needed. I think they need to get bigger. I think they need.
But he's huge. I mean,
I know. That's what I'm saying. He's not a guy that I would be moving.
I agree.
think they need to get bigger, and I think they need a goalie yesterday.
Yeah.
In terms of how this team takes another step forward. And I say that being a Devin Levi believer, by the way. I just think what you asked him to do this year was so exceptional. It was so out of the norm that you put a lot of pressure on him and, frankly, the rest of the team for that to come through. The Sabres are actually playing much better hockey over these last few weeks, unfortunately, when all the pressure is off. I mean, they're playing at a playoff pace since the calendar turned to 2024. It's just that they didn't wake up in time in order for that to happen. But in terms of,
you're playing with house money, Frank. And the reason I'm grinning, just to put some context to it, when we talked Calder picks before the year, Johnny said the only guy that could challenge Connor Bedard and he thought could win was Devin Levi, who's been in the American League for 90% of the season. So
I don't think that's a bad
why I
take,
had a big
though.
grin.
I actually would have agreed with that take in the beginning of the season. And in fact, I think I did have him on my list of Calder candidates, because what he kind of showed in a really limited runway last year was that he might be close. And there has been another goalie who has stepped into Buffalo in unusual circumstances and had gone on to have a Hall of Fame career right out of high school. So it has happened before. And what I would say is, when you think about where they go next, it's really now the question is, what do you do this summer? Is there can you bring in another goalie, or will that then further push back Devin Levi and that development? Does he just need to play games in the American League? I don't know what the answer to that is, but
that is the answer. He does. I mean, look, I watched this kid play in college. I called his last ever college game when his team lost in the tournament. I think he's a good player, but when Johnny started saying that, I laughed in his face. Couldn't have disagreed more. He's undersized, and I never in a million years thought he would slide right into the NHL without having to learn the pro game, reading rushes, reading angles, speed changes, release points, everything. So I'm glad you two agree on that. I couldn't have been further off that bandwagon, but I just wanted to give context because I did see someone in the chat.
Just pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, whatever. Well, you thought Elias Pettersson was getting 12.5. So
Shane Bolin said Johnny and Colby have some sort of inside joke going. That is the inside joke. And saying that Devin Levi would be in the American League all year is a hell of a lot different than being $900,000 off per season on Pettersson, which I thought was a real possibility. So
to put a bow on that, I think if they were to move Tuch, I think that would be a foolish reaction in what's been a tough year. I think he's the guy that drags that team into the fight.
He seems part of the solution big time.
And guess what? When you make a trade like they did, half the battle on the Jack Eichel deal is getting players who want to be in Buffalo, and Tuch really wanted to be in Buffalo. Yeah. So anytime you get one of those guys, keep him.
He's from Syracuse. I watch his brother Luke play every weekend at BU, and not quite as talented, but there's some similarities there. Let's stay in the Metro, Johnny. I mean, sorry, Frank.
We got a lot of chat questions from Islander fans, and everyone's asking if they're going to be buyers or sellers. And I guess we'll go specifically with Brian Garcinski. Will Isles make any moves? Maybe Duclair fit, maybe a Wahlstrom for Kaliev, change of scenery trade. Frank, I'm sure Lou Lamoriello doesn't let much slip, but
nope.
I have to imagine he's going to be very aggressive. And Colby and I actually touched on it yesterday. The Islanders' schedule over their next 6 games, those are 4 out of 6 winnable hockey games, at least on paper, games they should win. So you have to imagine that Lou will be more aggressive as opposed to not being aggressive come Friday.
I really have a hard time reading it because everything that he's done to this point would signal that they would be aggressive. But I would also think that at some point reality sets in. And I know he doesn't wave the white flag easily, and I know that they're the sort of next team in the mix. When you look at the standings, chasing the Flyers, I would peg their chances as better than New Jersey and Pittsburgh, but by how much, really?
Well, Philly's also started to slide a bit.
Well, that's that. And if you've watched the Flyers over the last 10 days, like, you'd say there's a lot of really questionable losses. The one to the Caps really jumped out to me. You have a lead, you give up 5 unanswered goals. Like that's no good. You lose 7-6 to the Penguins the Sunday before that, who have had their own issues.
Cal Peterson, I mean, that was, I think that's the one, Frank, that you kind of just have to just say,
okay, but what about the Caps?
Yeah, no, that's a bad loss. I don't disagree with you. They are without Travis Konechny. He is for a team that's limited offensively, you talk about players who drag their team in. That guy drags his team in. Last night,
so I don't want to get lost on the Flyers because I want to answer this Islander question.
Go ahead.
I would say if they're going to be anything, it would be a buyer. I just don't know how aggressive it would be.
Yeah.
Who would you say is a player?
And by the way, I really liked that idea of a Wahlstrom for Kaliev swap. I do think, part of me in the back of my mind, having watched Kaliev a bit, and Stephen Ellis made this comparison on our Daily Faceoff live show, and I can't get it out of my head. He said, what if Kaliev is the next Owen Tippett?
But I do think it took a special personality and to unlock Owen Tippett. I really do. I mean,
you don't think Patrick Waugh could do that?
I'm just saying, I think it would take.
It's about as special as it comes.
Yeah,
now,
I mean,
Colby?
he's obvious. What'd you say, Johnny?
So what now, Colby?
Oh my God, you're such an idiot. So let's talk about the Flyers, Frank, because I thought Scott Laughton had a good game last night. He scores a goal. He makes some big plays in the third period to keep that game at 1. He's out there in overtime creating opportunities. I think if there's, GMs in the building last night, I think you see value with Scott Laughton. I really do. How much value? I don't know.
I disagree because value in the Flyers' eyes is starting with a first-round pick. So and I know that he's got the term left on his deal. I just don't think a team's giving up a first-round pick for Scott Laughton.
I don't either. But
then if that's the case, he's not moving.
So they'll hold on to him if someone comes around and says, we'll give you a second for Scott Laughton.
Yes.
Okay. So Scott Laughton is a first or nothing.
But I think here's where the Flyers get lost is, and by the way, I'm told that the Flyers have been making slow progress in talks with Walker and Sealer. I combined those two names. That was awesome. Walker and Sealer, it is trending in the right direction in terms of an extension. Obviously not done yet, but it's been a grind. But I think that's where the Flyers are beginning to get lost. Do not let the standings right now, which by the way, as we've pointed out, may well change between now and the night the playoffs start. Like, I don't think the Flyers have that third spot in the Metro on lock. And now you see them getting passed by the 2 wildcard teams. That's the biggest spot in peril in the East. And it's also coupled with the Drysdale and Ristolainen injuries that don't get lost in the shuffle of, well, we could be a playoff team this year. Maybe we should just keep these guys.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the worst thing you can do is take 2 players that received more opportunity than they've ever been given in their careers and fall in love and say, we have to keep these guys. And we're going to pay Sean Walker upwards of $5 million a year.
Oh my God. Come on.
That's where the ask started. I don't know where it is now. And even the analytics projections would have Walker somewhere around 4.8 a year.
Oh my God. That's insane.
But that's what the going rate is for someone that's a right shot D that puts up 30 some points that plays.
But what about the law? But what about the law of averages? Look at his entire career. Like,
you're making my point for me.
Yeah,
I'm saying I wouldn't get lost in that and say, we need to keep. I'd say I don't like second round pick. Fine, I'll take it.
When a player tells you who they are over the course of a few hundred games, that's generally who they are. There are outliers to that. There are guys who pop at 27. There's Ryan Hartman's out there. That does happen. It's the exception. It's not the rule. And Walker, who was having a hard time getting in the lineup in LA.
He was a healthy scratch in the playoffs last year.
is not a $4.5 million plus dollar a year defenseman. Now, if you can get him at $3.5 million and he's willing to take a 3-year deal, and then you reevaluate as you start to get good again, that's good value for a guy like that who's a right shot defenseman who can fill in on your power play. But like, think about it. If they're a good competing team, which they're not there yet.
And frankly, they're likely to be a non-playoff team next year.
So I think that is crazy to not use those assets. And even if you're not blown away and you can only get 2nd and 3rd round picks for those guys, that doesn't mean you can't then couple those types of things to move up in a draft or to acquire other things. That's where
that also doesn't mean you can't re-sign those guys in the summer.
Yeah, it's true. It doesn't usually work out.
It almost never works out. But like, if they are so in love with the situation and the coach, and if they are so in love with your market, tell them to come back to you. I mean,
yeah, well,
so then the Sealer part of it, I think Sealer is pushing $3 million himself.
Yeah,
like you will not find a bigger Nick Sealer fan in the NHL than me. I love Nick Sealer. He's one of my favorite players to watch.
Why?
I love his story.
Why?
Why? Because he was almost out of hockey 3 years ago. I think he's physical. I think he competes his ass off. I think he squeezes every drop out of his skill set. I think he's limited, and he. Okay, so
you're
my point is,
yeah.
But I wouldn't. I wouldn't pay him $3 million a year.
So you love him so much, but you wouldn't give him $3 million a year.
Correct. You're hearing me correctly.
Well, that means you'd give me at least $6 million a year because I know you love me more than you love Nick Sealer.
No, I love Nick Sealer at $800,000.
Okay. Well,
I don't love Nick Sealer at $3 million.
Yeah. Okay. Point
right,
proven.
Let's move on to a different team.
And I would never give you $6 million.
That I know, Frank, you feel pretty good about. I think they have potential to be the biggest surprise of trade deadline day. We talked about them yesterday. The Minnesota Wild have been slowly creeping up here. I know it's still pretty far-fetched for them to get into the playoffs, but what do you think Bill Guerin is thinking right now? Because that's another team where they've been relatively mid over the past few years, and they are, in my opinion, a team that's desperate to do something and make some noise in the playoffs. So what do you think?
I think that's an unfair characteristic or characterization.
On them mid,
back-to-back 100-point seasons. I know they have.
What have they done in the playoffs? What have they done in the playoffs?
That's for 25 years now.
Yeah, is that not mid?
No, but I think that team making the playoffs in back-to-back years with 100-point seasons with $16 million in dead cap space is the opposite of mid. I think it's an accomplishment.
What is mid? Can someone please tell me what mid is?
It's just like, to me, it's not sexy,
average,
not exciting. It's average. Yeah, it's just a younger way to say average.
Middling, yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, okay, Boomer. So what I would say is, I think that was an accomplishment. I think this year has been a huge disappointment, and I think the big story in Minnesota this year has been their injuries that piled up for a big stretch of time. They've been without Jared Spurgeon for most of the year. When they did have everyone go down, it was all at once. It was Kaprizov, Gustafsson, Spurgeon, Brodin, a bunch of guys that weren't just in numbers wise significant, but I think for a stretch they were icing a lineup that was in the $40 million range. So that's how significant their injuries were. I think they can be a better team under John Hines, and I think their game plan is to maximize value on Brandon Duhaime. I think they're going to get second round value for him. That's what they're looking to cash in on. I think he's an ideal fourth line, scrappy playoff player that I will guarantee you, I will bet you, Johnny, a rent payment that Brandon Duhaime scores. If he gets traded, he scores at least one giant playoff goal. Okay.
Deal. What's the return for me there?
Yeah, I'll give you my mortgage payment.
Okay.
So more bets, Johnny can't. More checks. He's writing more checks he can't cash.
What do you consider? What do you consider a big playoff goal? Just like a game winner?
I would say for
overtime?
a fourth liner, like any goal of consequence in a playoff series
I'll take that bet.
Is pretty big. And by the way, if you're an
let's
Islander
forsake.
fan or whoever watching, Cal Clutterbuck has scored a ton of them in his career. For whatever reason, Cal Clutterbuck scores more in the playoffs than he does in the regular season. It's bananas. Brandon Duhaime will be that guy for someone. So they're going to try and get maximize value, second round value for Duhaime. They're going to then, I think, try and do right by some of their players that they can, if they can. If Pat Maroon wants to go somewhere, they're going to try and facilitate. They only gave up a 7th rounder to get him. They'll probably help him get to a playoff team if someone comes calling. They've been trying to unload John Merrill, who has 1 year left on his deal. That has not been successful. And then everyone else that's kind of in the mix there in mini, they'll listen. Who's that?
Fleury?
Nope. Fleury's staying put. Fleury and Bill Guerin had a meeting and they both agreed.
That.
Yeah, they both agreed that he's staying put.
Missed that one.
I don't think he's the kind of guy that wants to move around a lot either. I think even going from Chicago to Minnesota was difficult for him, even though the team was bad. I mean, he's
in a spot where, look, 17 years consecutively in the playoffs. I think it's an individual record in the expansion era. I think he wanted to see it continue, but when this Wild team went on a bit of a run the last few weeks and started playing a lot better, like 7-3 or 8-2 in their last, 10 game stretches, that he was saying, let me see if I can help this team get in. And if he were to go somewhere, the idea was he didn't want to go somewhere and sit there and open the door. He wanted a chance to play and contribute. And there just really aren't a ton of those opportunities available.
Okay.
For a surefire playoff team.
Let me ask you, what are the Edmonton Oilers going to do? I mean, I want to get to a couple of the Canadian teams. I'm curious about the Oilers. I'm curious about Toronto, and I'm curious what's up with Noah Hannafin, the latest there. So, what are you're always very dialed in with the Canadian teams. You have as good a beat on those teams, Frank, as anyone I always see. So what do you think? Start with Edmonton. What's Holland up to out west?
I think they're working through a process where they're trying to evaluate what's the most they can get for their assets. They're in an ideal world, they'll be able to add a top 6 forward. And when I say top 6, I mean legit, whether it's Buchnevich or Toffoli. Gensel, you could probably cross off the list. They're not going to trade top picks for a rental who they know is not going to re-sign there. So that's sort of the world that they're living in. I think in a lesser kind of check down scale would be Tarasenko as well. And they're also trying to add a depth defenseman. But if they can't get one of those top 6 wingers, the next thing would be, can we do a depth defenseman and a center for our bottom 6? And can we do that in a package? So a lot of people have talked about the idea of Nick Dowd and Joel Edmondson, or can we do Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick, 2 guys from Anaheim? So it's starting at the top with the highest price sort of acquisition they can make. Then if that doesn't work, it's going to be what kind of package we can put together, and then that's sort of how they're going to manage it from there. They're also at the same time having to potentially unload a roster player. And Ken Holland has been making calls over the last 10 days or so to gauge which teams would be willing to take on which players. So think Warren Fogle, think Brett Kulak, think guys that the Oilers have a little bit of cap space I think on deadline day, it'll be $2.3 million. But if they're going to trade for anyone of significance, they're going to have to unload a roster piece as well.
And one specific player that I have to ask about, a friend of the show, is Frank Vetrano going to get moved? Because it seems like Anaheim doesn't want to do it. And
Colby's
if they are going to do
friend
it,
of the show.
Huh?
Colby's friend of the show.
I don't know. He might be on Colby's shit list. Not actually
Again?
anymore. They squashed the beef.
Okay.
But it seems like the asking price is just too high, right? I mean, what are you hearing as far as Frank Vetrano goes?
I think he's a lowercase situation as to what Pavel Buchnevich is in St. Louis, in which Doug Armstrong is sitting back saying, look, I would move this guy, but you're going to have to come in and really make it worth my while. Anaheim, I don't think is really that interested in moving Vetrano, because the next thing that Pat Verbeek is going to have to go out this summer and do is get the next Frank Vetrano. And he also recognizes at the same time, though, that at that cap hit with one more year remaining, that Frank Vetrano right now is way more valuable to someone else than he is the Ducks, where there are no cap space considerations. And, I think he's really liked it in Anaheim. Will he re-sign there when his contract is up? That's another question, and maybe one that gets answered in the summer if he doesn't move.
Are you really willing to pay him a shitload of money that he would demand right now after this type of season? That would be foolish, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think they are. So I think it's slightly more likely than not that Vetrano gets moved. And if I were to pick a destination, I would say I think the Rangers have spent a long time examining what that fit would be like. And if it's going to include a roster player, I think that's exactly where Kakko comes in, because it makes sense for the Ducks in the young collection of forwards that they're putting together, that you would add him to the mix and give him a shot.
All right. Well, Frank, we really appreciate your time today. We're excited to watch you basically for what?
When's the new trade targets board coming out, Frank?
We had one yesterday. It takes the life out of me. So that was a top 50 dropped yesterday afternoon. So 50 names in play. We'll update it throughout the week. And Friday, we have our 4-hour show, 11 a.m. We'll take you past the deadline at 3 p.m. Eastern. So come on over to the Daily Faceoff YouTube page. If you haven't already, hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you on Friday.
I'll be active in that chat all day Friday.
And I'm sure if you watch DFO live at noon today, I'm sure some of these topics will be talked about. I'm sure the trade board will be talked about. So we'll have tons of content going on the DFO YouTube page really all week, and then leading into the trade deadline special, which will be a lot of fun. Carter Hutton and I are joining Frank and Tyler Yaremchuk for most of those 3 or 4 hours that will be on there. So Frank, we didn't get to every team. I'm sure there's more questions. We'll let you go. I'm sure you got to go take care of some other things today. We appreciate your time as always, and we will talk to you soon. All right.
See you guys.
Thanks, Frank. All right, Colby. A lot to talk about, a lot to go over. Still 3 more days to go to the trade deadline. I'm just curious on your opinion of just like this time of year. Do you enjoy this kind of talk, or is it something that like you can't wait till it's over? I'm not a big trade deadline guy. I don't find all the hype. To me, it's just so much hypotheticals. Like it's 6 weeks leading up. Like I hate talking to fans about it. I have people who I've never met in my life DMing me, asking me what the Rangers are going to do 6 weeks prior to the deadline, as if I know more than anything that's been put out there. And I just can't wait until Saturday comes, where you know the roster you have, you know what you're competing with, and all this kind of nonsense talk can just be put to bed. Because to me, the trade deadline is all, it's the NHL be a GM mode, right? It's good old fashioned fun for the people that love doing it.
I don't think that's a bad thing, though. It gives fans an opportunity to.
I get why people like it.
Let their imaginations run wild. It does make me laugh every day on my, on your feed now on X. You have like your like popular feed, and then the feed of people you follow or whatever.
All these trade proposals.
All these trade proposals that fans put together, and you can always tell right away when you read the proposal who they're a fan of, which team they're a fan of, because these trades which they drum up in their head and they think are these fair trades. I look at these trades and I just laugh because they're so far from equal trades. It's just so obvious right away to know where these people's fandom lies. So I like the trade deadline. I wish there was more superstars that got moved throughout the season. I do think that it's a lot of entertainment for fans. And at the end of the day, you play hockey to entertain the fans, the people who spend their hard-earned money to go watch games and buy jerseys and watch on TV and this and that. So I think this time of year is a lot of fun. I honestly wish there was more big names on the move. I'm hoping there'll be some things that happen that people go, holy shit. Like, we didn't expect to see that at all. Guys who might not be on the trade targets board, guys that might have term. this and that, especially teams like the Islanders and the Bruins and teams that their general managers don't have leaks in the organization. Those are the teams that can always really go, whoa, like when Lindholm got traded to the Bruins a couple of years ago, or when Horvat got traded to the Islanders, like those GMs do a better job than everyone else at keeping things tight-lipped. So I think it's fun. I like it. I'm looking forward to Friday's show. And we'll see what happens. We're going to be talking about this stuff all week because as things start to come out, there'll be things that we have to address, obviously, and give opinions on. So let's keep the show moving today, though.
We have a good question in the chat. We have a question in the chat from Jim the Swede. Johnny and Colby, who's your Stanley Cup pick as of right now? I think it's a real possibility it lands in Canada this year. I like the Oilers, Jets, or Golden Knights. We haven't talked about a Stanley Cup winner, I feel like, in a while. So I think this is actually like a good time. Prior to deadline, we'll probably maybe do it post-deadline. But if you had to pick one team today, who's your team to win the Cup?
Well, first off, let me just address Jim the Swede. I don't think the Oilers are getting goaltending right now, and I know they've won like 4 in a row, but I don't trust what they have in net for 4 rounds of the playoffs. Winnipeg, I think, is interesting, but I'm not going there either. I think Florida, to me, the way they're playing, the way they're peaking,
the best team in the league right now.
I mean, they're dominant. I really thought last night was a measuring stick, and to be honest, that game finished 4-2. I don't know if it was that close. Just in looking at some of what the Florida Panthers did last night was expose some deficiencies in the Rangers lineup, and the Rangers have been playing as well as anybody in the East right now. So to see that happen, I think the Bruins are a good team, but I don't think they're a team that can win a cup. Although they have the goaltending. So yeah, like to me, like it's Florida's to lose right now. They made a deep run last year. They saw what it took to get through those rounds. They came up short. Matthew Tkachuk, man, like he's got some special characteristics to take his team through. We don't even talk about Barkov yet. He's the most underrated player in the entire league.
Last night was insane.
I mean, even on I think Reinhardt's goal, you see that little play he makes to push off Fox and create a little bit of extra space. He's so valuable. So what about you, Johnny? Who do you think?
I'm still saying it's Colorado. My pick before the season was Edmonton, but I've said all year long that the West runs through the Avalanche, and I think they're going to make a move at the deadline for a center. There's a possibility Landeskog is back for the playoffs. The only question mark for them is Georgiev, but we saw them win the Stanley Cup 2 years ago with Darcy Kemper in net, who wasn't, lights out. I think Nathan McKinnon has had a different level to his game this season. Cale Makar, best defenseman in the NHL. I think their blue line is as deep as it gets. Colorado's speed is second to none, I think, the way they get up and down the ice. And I'd love to see a Colorado versus Florida Stanley Cup final. I think that would be unbelievable. But to me, it's McKinnon and Makar and Rantanen. Those are 3 of the best 15 players in the NHL. And I think
some of that depends on if they get Landeskog back, when and if.
He's been skating,
I would say.
Yeah,
I get it, but I'm just saying, like, when and if they get him back, what level's he at? How's he feeling? I don't know about Georgiev. I've never been sold on Georgiev. I just haven't. I've heard things about him too, as far as how he is in the locker room and how his effort is in practice, and going back to when he was in New York. So we'll see what happens. But let's get to our tweet of the night tonight, Johnny. Before we finish off with our Betway bet of the day. Your press box buddy, Julie Stewart-Binks, had a pretty funny tweet last night. Give credit where credit's due. This was pretty funny. Mr. Larson, Matt Rempe is giving Mr. Larson.
Now comes out next week.
Matt Rempe is giving Mr. Larson.
It's a thing that the younger people say. It's like, this is
she a younger person though?
This is giving that. She has young energy for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
it.
like I don't have one off the top of my head.
I don't think your friend Julie likes me, by the way. I'm sure that I said something that has offended her.
I think a lot of my friends don't like you.
That's probably true. But I said hello to her and introduced myself to her at the All-Star, and it wasn't a real friendly hello back. So I'm thinking I probably said something to offend her, but I know that list is probably way too long to keep track of. But she did tweet something funny last night. So, all good.
Are your friends?
No, if you're funny, you're funny.
Yeah.
We'll give you credit as long as you're not on the no-fly list. Like we have people on the no-fly list that we won't feature on this show. We don't have to get into that. But what else you got tonight, Johnny? Before we bring in our guy Vic and we do our bet of the night. Because
we could talk about some of the games tonight, unless you want to save that for the segment. But as far as just this whole week goes, like keep your eyes glued to Twitter. Last night there was a lot of entertainment. Alex Wenberg didn't skate in practice yesterday, didn't play in the game for Seattle last night. Like I will be, my screen time this week is going to be ridiculous as far as looking at Twitter and just checking news and all that stuff. You never know.
I hear Wenberg obviously linked to the Rangers, but also potentially the Bruins.
Boston, right? Yeah.
I also think Wenberg could be linked to the Bruins, and I think that's kind of a Don Sweeney-esque type of player. He's brought players like that in before. Not your superstar type of player, more of those 200-foot type of guys, which I think Wenberg brings to the table. It'll also be interesting to see if Tony DeAngelo gets moved. I mean, they're willing to eat some of his salary. He doesn't make a lot of money. Hasn't worked out for him this year in Carolina, but he's still talented. He still is a righty who improves your power play the day he gets there. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets moved somewhere. What other games you looking at tonight?
The two games I'm watching tonight are definitely Florida, New Jersey. The Panthers on a back-to-back. Devils playing their first game at home with a new head coach in Travis Green. I think that building is going to be electric. It's something that
Wait a sec.
Devils.
Whoa.
What?
You think the Prudential Center is going to be electric tonight?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Why?
Because Devils fans have wanted Lindy Ruff fired now for 2 years, and they finally got their wish, and they are going to celebrate that. And I'm not saying, listen, like, call the fans what you want. If they want something and they get it, they're going to applaud. They're going to have a lot
electric,
of
really?
Yes, it's actually a really fun building to be in when the Devils
I'm not
are playing
saying
well.
It's not, but their team has been horrible. They're not in playoff. They're not going to make.
They're going to be happy with what
decision
was made.
Because the coach got fired, it's going to be an electric crowd.
Yes, I do. Yes,
I think that's kind of a stupid thing to say.
I think you're underestimating people in New Jersey. I really think you are.
I don't think I'm underestimating people in New Jersey. I spent half my year in New Jersey. Okay. I know.
We'll see what happens tonight. Okay. We'll see what happens tonight.
A good crowd and people showing up is different than electric. Like,
I know. I'm aware.
You love to misuse words that start with E, whether it's elite or electric. You just love to do that.
I'm aware.
How about Bruins Oilers tonight? That'll be a good game.
Screw that. I want to watch Islanders Blues.
They just played. Big win for the Bruins last night. They kind of needed that. A statement win over one of the hottest teams in the NHL, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Kind of put that to bed, put them kind of to bed on their streak last night, but really answered big time when they needed it. The Bruins, they needed a big statement win like that to kind of remind people that we are still a team that is in the hunt and we're a team that can contend. And how much does that win over a team they'll have to go through? How much does that affect Don Sweeney's mindset thinking, okay, we're still ahead of them. Okay. We could still go on their home ice and smack them in the mouth. So, it actually looks like the Maple Leafs have two decent goaltenders now with Wall and Samsonov, who's played obviously much better in this stretch. I mean, look, they're 9-2 or something in their last 11 games. So, Islanders will look to stay hot tonight. That's the ESPN Plus exclusive. They're playing good hockey. You went through their schedule. Good opportunity for them to catch the Flyers right now. I still don't think it's going to happen. Like the Flyers still get a point last night, a crucial point. They had opportunities to win it in overtime. They didn't get it done. Cam Yorkin specifically had a couple of scoring chances I thought he was going to bury in overtime. We've got Blackhawks Coyotes, a 9 p.m. puck drop tonight. I can tell you right now, I will not be watching that game. That will not be a game that I'm tuned into. Kings Canucks are on the late slate. Stars Sharks. You'd expect to see Dallas win. Tanev hasn't played yet. Still working on immigration and visa issues. So hopefully they can get that sorted out and get him in there quickly, kind of start gelling him into that lineup.
Yeah. I mean, should we bring in Vic, though, to see which game he's looking at for tonight?
Yeah, so
night?
Time for our Betway bet of the day. Must be 19 years of age or older, Ontario only. And please, please, please play responsibly. As always, our resident Toronto Maple Leaf super fan and producer, Vic, 0 for 1 on the show yesterday after I had your back.
I know.
About how we had to kick Johnny out of the betting segment because his picks are so bad. We bring you in, Vic. So I'm expecting more from you on pick number 2 on show number 2.
We took a big swing yesterday. We came in first show, first time doing it. We had to go big. We went for the big money early. We're going a little more. We'll say we'll be more safe now. We'll be a little more safe today. We're taking the Nashville Predators in regulation against the Montreal Canadiens. Nashville has won 8 in a row. They are the hottest team in hockey right now. On this 8-game win streak, let me give you some numbers here. 37 goals for in 8 games, 13 against in 8 games. So they're scoring about close to 5 per, allowing a little less than 2 per. So they're on an absolute tear here. Jake Allen has already been named the starter for Montreal. He's 5-12-3, 5-15 on the season, basically. They're rotating 3 goalies. I think Nashville should come up with this. We're bringing it in regulation to bring the juice down a little bit and get a number we like.
Let me ask you a question. Is that game in Nashville?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Late in the season, Montreal on a trip to Nashville. Guys probably were out last night, okay? Guys were probably enjoying Broadway last night. When you're out of the playoffs contention and you're in Nashville late in the season, the boys were probably out having a couple last night for Montreal. So you got to think a little of that Nashville flu coming into the locker room this morning. So I like the pick. I do. And Andrew Burnett, okay, who didn't get enough credit for what he did in New Jersey with their power play, with their offense. He's got a team that is scoring goals at will right now. And traditionally, goals have been a problem in Nashville. For a long time, goals have been a problem in Nashville. And now all of a sudden, you're seeing this Andrew Burnett factor, how fast they're playing, how much movement offensively they're having. They just signed Tommy Novak to an extension, Vic, a very, very good team-friendly type of contract. So you know he's going to be buzzing. A lot of money on the board for him tonight. After getting 3.5 sheets, I believe, was the AAV on Novak's deal. I like this pick. I liked it yesterday. I really did. And I like those big swings if I'm going to bet. Tonight is a little bit safer, but I think it's a solid pick. So we're going Nashville in regulation against Montreal. You heard it here from our guy, Vic.
Yeah, I let my hair down, rub the bald head. Let's get some good luck and let's pick some winners.
All right. Thanks for the pick. And that is our Betway bet of the day. Must be 19 years of age or older. Ontario only. Please play responsibly, unlike we know Johnny does. Probably going to have to Venmo him to make sure he's can cover the rent this month because of all his bet losses.
Well, Frank just made that rent bet with me on Duhaime scoring a big playoff goal.
You have so many bets out on the market right now, like person-to-person bets.
What's Frank's house like? What's his mortgage payment, you think?
Which one? Which house? That's the question.
I guess we didn't clarify.
You better hope it's not the beach house. That's all I will say. You better.
Well, I'll pay that mortgage if I can come for a weekend. Maybe we'll have to negotiate.
You won't. No, you won't. That you'll be cleaning dishes for a long time to pay that mortgage off. You'll be working in his kitchen for about the next 6 years.
All right. Well, let's talk about what we got for tomorrow. We believe we're having Colby Armstrong on as a guest tomorrow. Very popular guy in NHL media on Spit and Chicklets with the game notes, and he does a lot of Sportsnet and Penguins coverage.
He's everywhere. Pittsburgh's network. Yeah. I mean, he texted me and said, "All right, we'll get on tomorrow. We'll have a little morning cup of bullshit." And you can hear it in his tone of his voice. You know, it's funny.
He's
so yeah, best. we will have the other Colby from hockey. There's 2 of us. There used to be 3. There was a guy who played in the NHL for Florida, Colby Roback, was a first-round pick and played some games in the NHL. Hopefully, Johnny will get his name right tomorrow because he struggles with the name Colby.
I'm sure to call him Army.
Seen that. Probably call him Army or Arm Dog just to be safe. Because I'm going to alert him and make sure he jumps right down your throat if you fuck up his name, like you do mine a lot of mornings. But I think that's all we got. I know we didn't get through every team, but we'll make sure we cover all these different teams throughout the week as things start to come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you everyone in the chat for asking your questions. And sorry if we didn't get to all of them. We're going to keep getting some more trade questions throughout the week. What are you laughing at?
Can we start betting on Johnny's date success? I will tell you this, D. Ely. He's got pretty good success on dates. Okay. For all the shit that I give him, I have to give credit when the credit is due. Our resident golden retriever of the show, Jonny Lazarus, he is a good boy on dates. He's chivalrous. He picks up the tab. He takes them home in Ubers, or he walks them home. He does all the right things.
Yeah.
So he has good success on dates. I
just can't make it past 5 dates.
Yeah, he does not have a long lifespan.
That's where it goes wrong.
In that phase of his life where he kind of likes to, hop around, we'll call it.
All right, let's end the show.
Okay.
All right. Thanks everyone in the chat. Thanks to our producer, Vic. Hopefully his bet of the night hits, and we'll talk to you all tomorrow. Have a great day.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe